This will be two. So I gotta watch the time. I did some consideration about 25 years ago, 30 years ago. And I was in the middle of a bunch of work and I had a series of dreams. And I remember one of them particularly. I had a guitar, an acoustic guitar, and I was involved in a fight. It was like a sort of super Avengers type fight, and all sorts of things were coming at me, and I was using this guitar as a club. And in the consideration of this exploration that I've been involved in for 5 years now, pretty much started during COVID or just before COVID, just after COVID fell away is the big deal. It's been an exploration of what I don't understand about how society as a whole operates. And first off, it starts off with what the hell is going on, and remembering things like, the promises of being a child of the 60s and Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy and Malcolm X, and living in this part of the world and the kinds of things that were going on, and living in London in the 70s when a lot of things were going on, and then how things have turned out. And they've obviously turned out very, very well for some people, and for me they're just quoi. And then getting to a point of realizing where I am, which is really useful, and then feeling much more comfortable with it all, but very definitely not part of the thing, not in agreement with anybody ever, often, or for very long. And one of the things that did strike me was that my life, not all actors are like this, but certainly my take on acting has put me in a place, has put me in the archetype of warrior. There may be trickster, there may be any number of other things, but specifically in terms of warrior, because I don't risk my life. I don't go out and do those sorts of things which are associated with warriordom. I don't think that's the essence of warriordom. But since, if you want to include bravery as a characteristic, one reads that for many people, getting up and speaking in public, they would rather die than get up and speak in public. And a stage actor does nothing but get up and speak in public. And there are similar sensations and psychological traits and feelings that have to, especially in my position, because I was playing a pretty steady stream of major Shakespearean roles, but other major roles elsewhere. I just happened to be one of those who ended up being that guy. So often carrying pieces, shows, and it didn't feel onerous or burdensome. It felt quite natural from the beginning, and I think that's why the creators of the works, the directors and stuff, would say, "Oh yeah, he will carry the evening." It doesn't make me any better than any other actor on that basis, but yes. So and recently, I just thought of this thing. My sister says to me, this stuff that you're doing, that you're writing, it's not going to convince anybody. You're not going to convince anyone. And I thought, well, that's not what I'm trying to do. And what's interesting about that is that I think a lot of times when we hear people or listen or read people, I think very few people who are expressing themselves are trying to convince anybody. I think they are just, as it were, getting it off their chest. And that exercise is about as useful as anything any human being ever does. digging into themselves, finding out what their take is on stuff. Anyway, so this relationship to the warrior means that, many things I can claim that I'm sympathetic with, the peace on earth and all the rest of it. But it's not my job. My job is much more to do with confrontation, I feel. I go into a space, I go within, I cross over a low wall, if you like, to use mythological imagery, and I go off into a sort of hinterland and come back with observations. That's all I'm doing. It's not going to convince anybody. The only people who are convinced are the only people who will find it, who will like it on Facebook. The only people who will be people that it will serve. And I think that that's the point, that there's a sort of, that's certainly what I feel when I encounter the very rare persons that I feel an affinity with, speaking and expressing themselves. I think, oh, thank God. Not so much that one is not alone, but that what fun it is that somebody's out there too. And in a sense, if there's two of you out there, the possibilities of going further are greater. I think that that's the sensation one has on some level listening to Norman Finkelstein or Toni Morrison. One thinks, oh, wow, yeah, we can go there. And what that conversation would be like, which will never happen, but I'm just glad they're there. This will be one.